Anyway, welcome members, and welcome to members of the general public who attended the March planning meeting for Derbyshire Dales District Council. So before I get underway, if any speakers don't want to be recorded, please let one of the committee clerks know so you won't be recorded. If there is a fire alarm, it is for real, so please leave out of the double doors at the back of the room, go down the stairs, out of the main doors and up onto the top car park as far back as you can. Anyway, moving on. So we'll move on to the agenda now. Item 1, apologies. Tommy.
Yes, Chair, we've received apologies from Councillors Donnelly and O'Brien, and Councillor Froggatt is here as a substitute.
Thank you very much, Tommy. Item 2, approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. I move them. Second, Councillor Fitzherbert. Thank you very much. All those in favour, please shout. Thank you very much. That's been carried unanimously. Item 3, interest. Any member want to declare an interest in any of the items? Councillor Fitzherbert.
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarification, prior to the site minutes yesterday, I did turn up at the site 10 minutes because I was dropped off before I got on the coach later, and I did use the facilities at the applicant's house. Just to make that, I did not discuss the application with the applicant when I was inside of her house. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification, Councillor Fitzherbert. So anyway, moving swiftly on, items for determination. So item 5.1, which is application number 21/01458, full application. This is a single-storey extension at the Lodge, Farley Hill, Matlock, Derbyshire. And I have one speaker on this. It's the agent, Mr. Roger Yarwood. I think you know the procedure, Roger. You have 5 minutes, and if you get to 30 seconds left, I'll let you know.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to start by commenting on the implied criticism in the officer's footnote about the applicant's so-called unfortunate failure to engage in pre-application advice. I'm well aware of the pre-application advice service and use it where I think it is necessary or helpful, but in this case, where no other practical solution exists and where I was confident in my ability to submit a sound proposal, I judged it would be pointless. I object to the implication that this in some way justifies the recommendation of refusal. I'm struggling to see any logic in your officer's conclusions on this application. Your officer's sole concern is based on their assessment that the proposed extension is contrived and irregular. It's not at all clear how your officers can justify that conclusion. I submit that neither of those words can be applied to the proposed design. The extension is neither contrived nor is it irregular. It's quite true the proposal will be seen in views from the road, but that does not provide a reason for refusal. In large measure, the proposed extension replicates the form of a previous extension, which was removed at the time of conversion to a dwelling. The remnants of that extension are still apparent in the form of the buttress wall, which projects from the front elevation. This proposal will re-establish the former courtyard in front of the house. Replacing this pre-existing arrangement is surely neither contrived nor irregular. I understand there's been some criticism of the use of a hipped roof rather than a gable roof. I submit the hipped roof is a logical and historically sound design, but it could be replaced by a gable if this was considered more appropriate. The glazed link has been designed to minimise the impact by allowing the front elevation of the existing building to be seen through the light glazed structure. Separating the main part of the extension from the host building and providing a glazed link is a logical design solution which minimises the impact on the character and appearance of the house. I'm convinced that this proposal will not harm the character and appearance of the existing building in any way. Your officers do not appear to have given any weight to the pressing need for this extension so as to provide accommodation for a dependent relative. There is no other position which would provide a better solution. In my submission, this proposal represents a well-designed and fitting extension to the existing house, which will meet the pressing need. There is nothing in your officer's report, before you, which supports the officer's conclusions, and I believe they have presented you with an illogical and unfounded recommendation, which is based on an ill-judged assessment of the merits of this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roger. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. A number of points to come back there on. Just to explain to members and to members of the public as well that members visited the site with officers yesterday. to assess the impact of this development on the character and appearance of the existing building. Just to provide some context to members, this property you'll note is of some historic interest. Historic mapping indicates that it had an association with Farley Villa, possibly a coach house, or highly likely to have been a coach house with grooms accommodation above, and that's clearly reflected in the character and appearance of that existing building. The concern of officers is that by introducing such a large extension on the frontage of the building, in the form of a series of lean-tos and a corridor linked to a hipped building at the end of the property, will cause significant harm to the building's character and appearance, hence why we're recommending refusal of the application in this case. I accept the previous speaker's comments that the report is a little bit light on the analysis, but it is succinct and to the point in terms of recognising the harm to the character and appearance of this particular property. There is support in principle for extending a building of this nature. There is also support in principle for ancillary accommodation to serve a dependent relative. We're just not happy with the design and appearance and the siting of the extension in this particular case. Happy to take questions.
Thanks, Chris. Councillor Purdy. Gary, can you turn your microphone on, please?
I was quite surprised when I saw only 2 pages to this report, so I do think it lacks depth, quite frankly. What does concern me more, though, is that I've been on planning since 2007, and I know for a fact we've been on a site visit there in those years, probably 6, 7 or 8, 9 years ago. There's no mention of it here.
Yes, so in setting out in the officer's report, the relevant history section will pick up on applications of relevance. It may be that it's not a comprehensive list, but it should pick up on all the applications that are recent and pertinent to the assessment of this particular application. I have to confess, I didn't physically or sign this report off myself, but it is a report and a recommendation that I agree with, having looked at it and having regard to the character of this particular property.
I can come back, Chair. Yep. I mean, if either we go with officers' recommendations or defer, I would hope that the agent would discuss with our officers, because it's far better to get an agreement before coming to a planning committee when the planning committee decision is so final. So I do think that intermediary, whatever happens to say from the decision tonight, either refusal with the officers or it's deferred, some dialogue needs to take place so that we can come to an agreed extension, because I believe in principle we can extend this place.
Thank you, Councillor Purdy. Councillor Burford.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 questions, if I may. I also note that pre-planning advice was not taken up. Can I just ask the officer if it had been taken up, would some of the fundamental planning problems have been resolved? Or was there a possibility that they would be resolved? And the second question, which has just come to my mind actually, am I right in thinking that all planning applications are for the property and not the person? I seem to recall that on every planning course I've ever been on, it's always been about the property, not the person and the person's circumstances.
I'll take the second question first. So planning permission relates to land and not individuals, unless it's specifically conditioned in such a manner. So the permission would relate to the land and the property in this particular case. Just going back to your first question, if the applicant, I mean, they don't have to submit or engage with us through our pre-application advice service, but we do try and resolve issues with the design of development, whether it's an extension to a house, whether it's a large housing development, to try and add value and to address issues such as this, where we've got significant concerns about the siting of this extension and its form on what we consider to be the principal elevation of the building.
Okay, Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much. I kind of agree with Chris that the hip arrangement on the conservatory end doesn't match the ridge of the existing house. if we were to, could we condition a hip and then just say, yeah, fine, or do we have to defer it and ask them to come back, or what? I don't know what the process would be.
I think in this particular case, because we've got fundamental concerns with an extension of this nature, my advice would be to issue a decision on this application, because that enables the applicant the ability to exercise their right to appeal. They can then utilise what we call a free go, and within a year of that decision, submit a new application to us, having engaged in pre-application discussions if they wish to do so, to address the concerns that we have, and to for us to then ultimately, hopefully, support a scheme that's acceptable to us in development plan terms.
I think I got that, but could you just do the first bit again?
Yes. So what we're saying is that the advice is for us to issue a decision on this application because we've got fundamental concerns with the application as presented, but it doesn't prevent the applicant from being able to submit another application to us, utilising what we call a free go, so it doesn't cost anything to submit another application. And my advice would be to engage with us through our pre-application advice service before submitting that application.
So the condition would be unnecessary if we just defer a day, or would we have to go with officer recommendation for the free go to apply?
No, the free go applies regardless of what happens this evening, and once the decision's been made, or that decision could even involve withdrawal of the application. But the change of the form of that annex part, and the change of the roof form from a hip to a gable, wouldn't address the other concerns that we have with this application. So that wouldn't go far enough to address the issues that have been raised.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Buttle. Councillor Gamble.
Thank you, Chair. Just as a bit of an add-on, because it was sort of mentioned about, obviously it was brought into, and the agent put quite a bit of weight on what this extension is going to be used for. Should we put any weight on the dependency of the person who's going to be using this, or?
This is an interesting question. Dependent relative units or accommodation, there's a specific policy in our local plan that deals with that type of development. In this particular case, because of the personal connection of the applicant to the person that would be living in that annex, and the shared accommodation, or shared facilities, so access to site, garden area, etc., is such that it wouldn't constitute a separate unit of a separate residential unit in planning terms. It would be an ancillary element to the existing residential use. So that the application is a householder application, and that is correct in this particular case. If it was a self-contained annex with its own garden, its own curtilage, access and everything else,
it would probably have a bit more weight, would it? So we're actually to look at this as a whole house. So
yeah. It's an extension to a house effectively, but the extension is required to accommodate a dependent person in this particular case.
I'm just thinking, obviously, I mean, I'm assuming it would have been quite easy to have a conversation with the applicant as they're a counsellor. Was there any sort of conversation that took place with advice to withdraw this application? Because obviously it's...
Yeah, well, I'm not the case officer of this application. As from what I understand, we've obviously issued this agenda in advance of the meeting, and the applicant did have the opportunity to discuss the recommendation with us. So through their agent, and we would have entered into those discussions at that stage. But there are fundamental concerns with this application. That's why we've deemed that the requirement to engage in a positive and proactive manner is best served in this case by issuing a decision, because then it allows the applicant to appeal that decision, and also then it doesn't prohibit them from engaging with us as well.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, I mean, considering the brevity of the report, I'm sort of, in a way, I'll be a bit worried going this far, but just in case it does, I mean, considering there's very little detail about anything, there are no conditions on this. How would anyone be proposing to put conditions? Because obviously, most sort of residential developments do have some level of conditions on.
Yeah, because we're recommending refusal, we've only, obviously, in the recommendation, there is only the reason for refusal in this particular case. If we were minded to approve the application, and whether it's this application or a future application, you would restrict the occupancy of the dependent relative part of the building to a dependent relative, and you'd prohibit a separate unit of residential accommodation from being formed. You may also want to condition some of the design details as well to ensure a satisfactory appearance.
Yeah. So, I mean, do you have in your mind sort of, you think that there's something that would be acceptable here? Because obviously there is what seems to be an essential a difference of opinion on aesthetics, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we'd be unreasonable to say you cannot extend this property. I think you
Yeah.
can extend this property in a manner that's
But-
respectful of its character and appearance, and I think that's ultimately what we'd hope to do.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. Are we now in debate, Chair?
Not yet, we're still in questions, but if you
Right,
want to
it
kick
is
it off,
debate,
let's
right.
see.
All
I'll
the
tell you what
questions have
then, if
been
you want to kick it off, Peter, you kick it
I'll
off.
wait till debate.
Okay. Well, in which case, I've got nobody else down on my list, so we're in debate now, Peter, so
Right,
kick it off.
thank you. Looking at this property, though it's been rebuilt in the style and surrounding area, and I think it's in keeping at the moment with the surrounding area. I think the officers are correct in their assessment of this, as this will definitely alter the appearance of this area. So I think the officers are correct in this their judgment. I'm very disappointed that there wasn't pre-planning advice sought. It should always be a way forward when things are difficult, that we have dialogue with the officers, and we can sometimes come to a satisfactory conclusion. But unfortunately, this wasn't the case in this, so I'm have no alternative but to move this officer's recommendation for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Slack. Councillor Burfoot.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to second that. I mean, I think it's unfortunate. I think that's the right word, really, to say that pre-planning advice wasn't sought by one of our own councillors. I think the planners have got it right. I think there are fundamental reasons in terms of visual impact for a recommendation of refusal, but I do hope that if it is refused, then I do hope the applicant will get into a dialogue with our planners to find a way forward, because fundamentally I would have thought there was a way forward for an extension to this building, but this isn't the right one. Just as a sort of footnote, if you like, I've thought for some time that any applications that come in from our own councillors, there ought to be a way of them being considered by neighbouring local authority planning committees. I've thought that for a long time, and I think that should happen. I don't know how it could, but that's just my thought.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Burfoot. Councillor Gamble.
I was going to offer to second as well, actually. So, yeah, no, I think the officers have got it right on this occasion. I think it sounds like attempts have been made, and if refusing this is the way to get the applicant to the table to actually to discuss, then I think that's what we should do tonight.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gamble. Councillor Fitzherbert.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I'm broadly in agreement. I think the principle is established, and I think we're all in agreement with that. And I'd urge the applicant to go back and have the free go, as Chris suggests. It's not in. I'm just looking at the old picture that we were showing yesterday. It's not in a conservation area, so it should be able to be extended at some stage in the right manner. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Fitzherbert. I've nobody else down on my list, so it's been moved and seconded for refusal. All those in favour, please show. Those against? So that's been refused unanimously. Thank you very much, members. Right, moving swiftly on. Application 5.2, which is application number 21/01-352 full, land to the east of Gold Close, Darley Bridge. We've got quite a few speakers on this. So the first on my list is Mr. John Best, the applicant, to speak in favour of the application. You have 5 minutes, and when you have 30 seconds left, I'll let you know.
Good evening, councillors. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight regarding this application. My name is John Best, and I, along with my wife Emily, own and operate Rapid Horizons. We're a small family-run business with a passion for outdoor adventure activities. We employ 5 local instructors who provide professional river tours to our customers, who include tourists, charities, educational groups, and the general public. The vast majority of our tours are operated on the River Derwent from Darley Bridge to Matlock Bath, with customers who value the mental and physical health benefits that paddle sport activities offer. We operate for approximately 9 months of the year when the weather and river conditions lend themselves to responsible paddle sport provision. Our normal activity operating hours are from 10 AM to 4 PM. This is mainly during weekends and weekdays out of term times. We have accessed the river from Darley Bridge as individuals for over 40 years, as a business since 2012, and we know many of other paddle sport enthusiasts, including canoe clubs, universities, colleges, scout groups, outdoor centres, and commercial operators who do the same. The access point at Darley Bridge is well established and provides a safe and responsible launch point that is used by a range of river users. We recognise that angling clubs hold the fishing rights along this stretch of river, and we have always been respectful of their presence whilst conducting our activities. Rapid Horizons is affiliated to British Canoeing, the national governing body for paddle sport. We are licensed and regulated by HSE and hold comprehensive public liability insurance for the activities we provide. As well as offering paddle sport tours, Rapid Horizons offer British canoeing courses and qualifications ranging from beginner to advanced tuition, whitewater safety and rescue training, leadership qualification, and coaching awards. We have a good working relationship with the Environment Agency who help to improve the condition of the launch point at Darley Bridge back in 2020 to provide a safer entry point for river users after the 2019 flood. Our organisation regularly takes part in river cleanups and plays an active role after floods to ensure the EA are aware of any obstructions or pollution that may cause harm to river users and the general public. Our long-standing storage unit lease was ended by our landlord last year, and we are currently forced to use temporary storage for our equipment. Our business needs a sustainable base to store paddle sports equipment, and naturally the most sensible place for this is in the location of the majority of our operations. It is in this context that we have submitted the proposal under discussion. We believe that it will benefit not only our customers, but also local residents, tourists visiting the area, and the local outdoor community. A few of the benefits we believe this proposal will provide: it will allow us to reduce the amount of journeys we make with our vehicles, easing congestion and reducing emissions. It will mean we no longer need to use the on-street parking on Wensleys, thus freeing up parking spaces for residents. The introduction of the service road will mean our vehicles will no longer have to perform 3-point turns on Wensleys public highway, which we are aware can be an inconvenience to nearby residents. It will allow us to offer our customers and staff secure cycle parking, luggage storage, and dedicated toilet and showering facilities. This will offer a better experience for our customers whilst alleviating demands on other local facilities. The addition of toilet facilities and the changing area will allow us to provide a safer, more hygienic space for customers and staff to get ready for their activities and have access to basic welfare. It will improve our overall customer experience, which in turn will help uphold Matlock and the surrounding area's strong reputation as a go-to tourism destination. Just regarding the concerns on the flood risk. Due to their nature, buildings for paddle sport organisations are typically located next to rivers and watercourses which are likely to fall into flood zones. The site on the proposed building is well inside flood zone 2, which is a medium risk of flooding. It is not on the functional floodplain and is in the same category as the neighbouring archery club and most of Darley Bridge village. The Environment Agency and Lead Flood Authority have assessed the application and raised no objections. The site of the proposed building has, to our knowledge or Environment Agency records, never been compromised from the river breaking its banks from Wensleys in the past. The business operates primarily in season and does not ever operate when the river is dangerously high. The building will store water sports equipment that is designed to operate in wet and damp conditions.
30 seconds left.
Okay, we believe this application is compliant, progressive, and offers a wide range of benefits. We are pleased that the District Council Planning Officers, Environment Agency, and the County Council Highways and Flood Risk Team have all reviewed the application, and their professional opinion is to conclude there is no reason to refuse application, as it complies with all the relevant planning policies. They have therefore recommended this application for approval. We respectfully hope you are also able to see the benefits of this application and offer your support. Thank you.
Bang on the money. Thank you very much. The next on my list is Mr. Peter Astles, local resident, to speak in favour of the application. You have 3 minutes, and similarly, I'll let you know when you have 30 seconds left.
Yep, thank you very much for listening to us today. Just a second. With my arm, sorry. But yeah, I'm Peter Astles. I have a business based in Darley Dale. We make water sports equipment. I'm also a local resident, lived in Derbyshire, in the Derbyshire Dales for almost 30 years. I'm the founder of a charity called Paddle Peak, of which Rapid Horizons are active members. We clean and care for the River Derwent, removing tons and tons of rubbish, litter, agricultural waste and sewage pollution every year with our canoes and kayaks. We also inspire and enable local young people to try paddle sports. In fact, we've had a group of 10 youngsters on the Cromford Canal this evening just before I came. One of our goals is to improve access to local water, including the canals, the rivers and reservoirs. And our goal is to create river access points with parking, changing and toilet facilities. People have used the river at Darley Bridge, accessed the river for paddle sports for 50 years. The access situation is quite complicated. You'll probably hear this later on. British Canoeing believe that we have a historic right of access to our water. The Angling Trust see it very differently. DEFRA suggests we negotiate access on a local level, and this is more difficult than you think, with none of the angling clubs even coming to join us for a cup of coffee. Rapid Horizons are one of the country's leading professional adventure experience providers. They're very professional, highly qualified, and super safe. Did anyone see Susan Coleman's Grand Day Out the other night on the TV? John was there taking the presenter down the river, selling the Derbyshire Dales and the Derwent Valley for tourists. TripAdvisor, 5 stars, 304 excellent reviews is Rapid Horizons. Click things to do, look in Matlock, filter down to 5 stars, and Rapid Horizons is number 1. 304 excellent reviews. Rapid Horizons are members of a local business group inspired by the Peak District, which part of Derbyshire Dales District Council initiative. They're role models for the tourist sector within that organisation. Please support this application. It's a win-win for everyone: residents, tourists, activity providers and paddle sport enthusiasts. It'll ease traffic and parking congestion in Darley Bridge. It'll provide discreet changing and toilet facilities, saving people the need to pee in the bushes, that kind of thing. It's win-win.
30 seconds left.
It'll promote tourism, enhance visitors' experience, create and preserve the local employment, and promote healthy and environmentally friendly activity in a wonderful green and blue space of the River Derwent Valley. There's not a better way to enjoy this valley and its cliff edges, the trees, wildlife than from a boat on the water. So please support this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next on my list is Mr. Gary Edwards, local resident, to speak in favour of the application. You have 3 minutes, and I'll let you know when there's 30 seconds left. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. Obviously, I'm speaking in favour of this application. I have got a vested interest in this application. I am a freelance kayak and canoe guide working for Rapid Horizons. Obviously, outside of my work with Rapid Horizons, I do spend quite a bit of time in the Peak District and the surrounding dales. Rapid Horizons have been providing professional outdoor adventure trips for over 10 years, and are not alone in enjoying the beauty of the Derwent. Other providers, as John's already mentioned, kayak and canoe clubs up and down the country use this on a regular basis. For example, some of my coaches in terms of kayaking have been using the River Derwent since 1973, for example. In terms of the build plan, from what I've seen from the plans, it's very sympathetic to the surrounding countryside. Obviously, in relation to the highway congestion, and the parking. That's also been very well considered in terms of stuff like that. So and it's also been planned and developed with the floodplain risk fully taken into consideration. In terms of transport and equipment, trailers, these will now be on site if this rather than actually being on the road. There's also no additional customer traffic, as customers' vehicles tend to be parked down in the artist corner car park, and we collect from there in our own vehicles. And also, I think, as John's also mentioned, our mileage on the main road into Matlock and back to Darley will be reduced. The development's provision of showers and changing facilities is very welcome from a staff and a customer welfare point of view. This is going to vastly improve the off-water.
30 seconds left.
The off-water experience for the customers. And it's always been the philosophy of Rapid Horizons to encourage the responsible and sustainable use of this beautiful resource. Protecting and managing the environment we operate in, and also is also very important. Being a considerate.
That's it. Unfortunately, you've had your 3 minutes.
All right. So
thank you very much. All right. The next on my list is Miss Jane Wallace, local resident, to speak against the application. Similarly, you have 3 minutes left, and I'll indicate when there's 30 seconds left.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Jane Wallace, and I've lived at Waterbeach Cottage and Wensleys since October 2017. Since that date, there has been a flood of varying severity at Darley Bridge, including this field, every year. I therefore consider the flood risk assessments and zoning of the Environment Agency to be woefully inaccurate. For example, Flood Zone 2 means there is a between 1 in 100 and 1 in 1,000 annual probability of flooding. So we've blown that out of the water in the last 4 years, haven't we? During flooding, a tiny corner of this area might not be actually underwater, but it is waterlogged and everything around it is flooded. The question of flood zoning is also referred to in the 2015 application by BJ Waters to extend their haulage company into this field. The application was rejected for various reasons, but the Environment Agency commented at the time, the functional floodplain should be kept clear of all development, including the introduction of porous paving. This is to ensure no materials are stored in this area, as it should be used in times of flood for storage and conveyance of flood water." End quote. They obviously considered this area of the field contained a functional floodplain. Directly in front of the proposed building, there is a large drain hole. The marker post for it's recently disappeared, but it is normally there. During the most recent flood, this was seen to be surcharging river water into the field in a quite impressive fountain. So basically, the river water is coming along and it's forced back up in this drain into this field where the proposed building is to be built. It is a very wet field. So if we accept that climate change will only increase the frequency and severity of floods, then surely we need every single bit of the field to soak it up and store floodwater when it comes. Even a small increase in floodwater can increase the flow across the field into the Wensleys gardens, and then combining with the water which comes in a pincer movement from further down the river, cause problems to the houses on Wensleys. And in our house, we are only inches away from inundation.
30 seconds left.
As a last side note, our field, which was part of the greater field, has a covenant from the Diocese of Derby prohibiting building. Does the rest of the field carry a covenant still? Thank you.
Thank you. Right, the next on my list, yes, it's you, Steve. So you've got 3 minutes. and I will let you know when there's 30 seconds left.
Thank you, Chair, and members of the Planning Committee for this opportunity to address you. I'm resident of Wensleys and briefly address traffic congestion and road safety aspects of this proposal. The application states that Wensleys is lightly used, serving approximately 5 properties. In fact, there are 8 dwellings with 16 permanent residents, all of whom are car owners. Vehicle access is required frequently by all residents, and from time to time, this involves the emergency services. The lane is in regular use by walkers, runners, cyclists, horse riders, as well as heavy farm equipment and Severn Trent and environmental agency vehicles. Access across Wensleys to and from the B5057 is required by BJ Waters heavy vehicles at all times. Residents of Main Street access Wensleys to use the residents' parking spaces. Anglers arise by car to access fishing pegs downstream. The 14 original allotments on Wensleys have been divided by the parish council into 23 individual plots, all accessed regularly by the now 23 leaseholders, generally in their vehicles. In addition to Rapid Horizon, several other water sport businesses and individuals arrive by vehicle to access the river. Dog walkers drive to and park at the location, and Wensleys also, of course, forms part of the busy 56-mile Derwent Valley Heritage National Walking Trail. The location shows a driveway of 36 metres long and 3 metres wide, leading to just 6 formal car parking spaces for staff cars, a minibus, canoe transporters and customer cars, and has no vehicle turning head. Canoeing groups, in our experience, generally comprise 15 to 18 individuals, most of whom will arrive by car. Add instructing staff and parking provisions appear entirely inadequate. The restricted number of parking spaces, the absence of a turning and manoeuvring space, and a single lane width of the access drive are likely to create safety issues, with drivers having to reverse along the driveway to conduct manoeuvres on the narrow lane of Wensleys, with its adjacent steep, rapidly eroding and undefended river bank, before parking indiscriminately on the eroding edge of the river or on the agricultural land which is private and adjoins the site. Intensification of traffic at this point would further increase the risk of accidents and harm to pedestrians. Thank you.
30 seconds to spare. Thank you very much. So the last on my list now is Mr. Martin Seddon, local resident, to speak against the application. You have 3 minutes. I'll let you know when you have 30 seconds.
Thank you, Chair. I live in Aston Lane, which is a short walk from the site. I'm speaking on behalf of local residents and as an experienced chartered town planner. I want to advise you that although the planning officer considers that the development would be acceptable in the open countryside and river floodplain, you are able to come to a different view, and there are local plan policies which can be used to support refusal of the application because of its harm to the character and appearance of the area. The site is outside the settlement boundary for Darley Bridge. The boundary at this point is well defined by a belt of trees and shrubs and a flood bank. It forms a clear boundary between the developed land and the rural countryside. The archery building and Waters Yard can hardly be seen behind the trees when viewed from Wensleys Lane. Moreover, they will be even more hidden when the trees come into leaf. So the proposed development will be separate and will not appear as part of the settlement. The development would involve creating another new access on Wensleys Lane, serving a non-agriculture building and a car park for customers and canoe trailers. As councillors will have seen at the site visit, the whole development will be highly visible and unscreened from Wensleys Lane as an intrusion in the field. Although landscaping is suggested, there is no room for any significant tree planting because of the space taken by the building, car park and flood bank, and anyway it would take several years for any planting to have effect. Users of the public footpath would also have to pass close to the development, reducing their experience of the open countryside. As far as I can see, there is no evidence that any alternative options have been considered between Darleydale and Matlock Bath. If the council allows this development outside the settlement boundary, it could find itself in a position where expansion of the facility or similar development applications could be difficult to resist. The officer report says that the building would not be so intrusive in this context to justify a reason for refusal. We totally disagree. Whether the building will be intrusive is a matter of opinion and planning judgment. It is entirely legitimate for members of this committee to take their own view and also disagree. The local plan policies quoted in the report about visual impact, S1, S4, PD1 and PD5, concern the need for high-quality, locally distinctive design, and the development should not be detrimental to the character of the local and wider landscape and setting of settlements. So,
30 seconds left.
Outside the settlement boundary, on the floodplain and in the open countryside, this development will be in the wrong place. We therefore respectfully request the committee to refuse this application on the basis that it will be harmful to the character and appearance of the countryside and contrary to the relevant local plan policies for protection of the countryside. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I move on to Gareth to take over, there's a little bit of late representation, so I want you all to have a look at that. It's quite lengthy, and I think council staff will be happy that everything's been answered. Are you happy? All ready? Anyway, over to Gareth.
Thank you, Chair. members went on site visit yesterday to look at the site in its context, looking at where the development would be proposed on the fringe of the settlement, and could see the nature of Wensley's Road, and they were also shown where the applicants currently launch their rafts canoes from, which we have looked into and we understand it's unregistered land. There was a point raised by one of the objectors, by Jane Wallace, about issue to do with the ownership of land, and a reference to the reference to a diocese, a covenant of a diocese. That is essentially a land ownership matter and a legal matter that really can't form part of how we would consider an application on a piece of land. I'll take questions. Thank you.
All right, members, open to you. Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. This particular land does get flooded. I've seen it. I've been there when flooding takes place. There is a very big flood area. This particular field where the vehicles are supposed to go and park could very well be waterlogged or in a condition where vehicles will get stuck, and we'll finish up with a lot of vehicles parking on the road. So has this been taken into consideration, Gareth? Because it's not summertime all the time, is it? When it's dry, we're going to get wet periods.
Well, I think the applicants certainly would take it into account. In times of flooding, they are very unlikely to be taking people out on rivers, and in that regard, very unlikely to be parking in within that particular area. They say that they do follow and get advice with regards to flood warnings as part of what they do. So I can only assume that in the event of flooding or that land getting flooded, they would be advising any customers that it was impracticable to actually use the river at that point, because it would be dangerous more than anything.
Just to come back, Gareth, it's not just in flood town. It could be flooded and then the land could be wet and sun could come out. They could try to get on that land and they could still get stuck. You know, it won't drain that fast, that land. It's by the side of the river, obviously. It's going to be saturated, isn't it, for long periods of time. So it's even when it's not flooding, there's going to be times when they're going to be struggling to get on there, in my opinion.
Well, I think if the conditions were such that the access was inoperable, the applicant wouldn't be able to use the facility, and so if they could still access the water, I suppose they might resort to the current practice of how they access the river if they can't access the building, if you like.
Councillor Gamble.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, could I just quickly go back on Councillor Slack's point about you saying that if it was flooded and if the ground was wet, they wouldn't go out. Am I right in remembering on when we actually went yesterday? Someone commented if you've been here 2 days ago, your feet would have been underwater. And did I hear right? One of the people who representing the company said they were out today. So that would seem as if there is a correlation, not particularly a correlation between wetland and not going out.
All I'm saying is I'm just looking at it from a practical point of view on the basis of if the conditions of the river were such that it was deemed dangerous, which in the case of a flooding event, I would have thought that would be the case, then I would have thought logical that the a reputable company would not put people's lives at risk by taking them out onto a river that was potentially dangerous.
Doesn't that make it more exciting?
If individuals want to kayak who have the experience, then they will do that anyway. But
Right.
if you're trying to offer a rafting experience or lessons to people who are not experienced, I would be very surprised if anyone would want to do that in the time of flood.
So it's like, right, can I just ask about the consultation that took place with county on the highways? Because obviously I'm sort of slightly confused as to what we're actually looking at here, because we seem to be in a situation where we're talking about that majority, if not all, the participants in this will be busting from Matlock, and yet many of the people who wrote in support seem to be very happy to be now getting car parking, and seem to point that one of the big advantages of this, I think even the applicant themselves at one point said one of the big pluses is this is going to provide car parking. What scenario were highways actually consulted about? Because I mean, 6 car parking places. If the other scenario turns out to be the case that everyone's really happy that they've got car parking at Darley Dale, 6 spaces wouldn't seem to be anywhere enough. Were highways consulted purely on the basis that only 6 cars would be used in that site, or were they consulted on the basis that many of the participants, which one of the people speaking tonight said, you often get groups of sort of 8 to 10 people. On what basis were highways actually consulted about the level of traffic?
What the highways have said is, but they will basically, notwithstanding what proposal is submitted or what is said, they will look at the situation as to what if they felt that the site needed more parking, or it needed further clarification about access, they would come back to the applicant on that. The Highway Authority have looked at this and have basically said that on the expected traffic flows, they don't envisage a problem with the site. Now, when they look at the application, they look at the proposal, they will look at what the applicant says, but they won't judge it solely on what the applicant says. They will make their own assessment of highways.
They'll make their own assessment as to what level of traffic a canoe business would generate.
Yes.
All right, then can you tell me what level they have estimated that the canoe business will generate then, please?
I can only go by their comments in response to the planning application, which is set out in the 5.4 in the officer's report.
Yeah, Chris.
Councillor Gamble, just to come back on that point. So the Highway Authority have access to what we call TRIX data. So for all types of different uses, they are able to model likely traffic flows and parking requirements based on floor space. If you look at their comments, they've said on-site parking and manoeuvring space is considered to be suitable for the scale of the proposed building. You have to accept that they've carried out that level of assessment in respect of this application, but those detailed questions in terms of detail, how they consider traffic flows from a particular development and its use and parking provision is a question really that you should direct to the local highway authority. We have to trust that they've based their comments on a sound assessment of this particular application and likely traffic that will be generated from it.
So I just wondered really, because I mean, I've got to admit I would have trouble looking at the various things that have been written about this application as to guess at what sort of traffic level will be generated, but okay.
Councillor Purdy.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Gareth. I mean, looking at the concerns, objections of angling clubs, it's no surprise that these two sporting activities are not going to come together, and there's some quite salacious comments in here, quite frankly, which are out of order, but that's my opinion. What I want to know, if I may ask, is RH does not have an access agreement with the local riparian owners to use the land, riverbed or riverbank, and have been in receipt of a number of letters, including solicitors' letters, to that effect. So I'm reading from page 22, Gareth, dated June 2013, November 2013, November 2014. Have we seen sight of those solicitors' letters, and are we comfortable either way that RH does have legitimate access to this point in the river?
The angling clubs did present a letter with a Queen's Council opinion, which says Queen's Council opinion is clear that there is no substantial evidence to give rise to a public right of navigation over these stretches of the Upper Derwent. However, as I say, as the applicant said, well, that's open to being contested by the British canoeing body, which would counter that argument. So it's really in the realms of a civil argument. Now, in terms of accessing the site, there's claims about they haven't necessarily got the right legal means of accessing the site. But again, it seems that over the years that has been accessed for such purposes. Again, it falls in the realms of a legal argument. We sought to check to see if we could find any information that might suggest a landowner, but on unregistered land. It doesn't mean there isn't a landowner out there, but it doesn't mean that the landowner would necessarily stop people using it.
Okay, Councillor, but I think Kerry's going to give us a bit of advice on unregistered land.
Yeah, just unless you're unhappy with the comments from Gareth. I mean, whilst it would be useful to know what the answer is to this riparian rights and the access, it is not within the realms of planning consideration. So it would only be background and sort of more for information purposes, and it's not something that we can consider as part of this committee.
Okay, Councillor Mrs. Burfoot.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 3 questions, please. I noticed it stated that the proposed opening times will be until 4 p.m. Is that 4 p.m. all year round? And I can't see any condition to that effect. That's the first one, please.
That's what the applicant has advised, and the way the operations would work would be that there would only be a limited time period by which the events would operate. So if you're starting off from the site in the morning, you will get so far and then have to clear up the equipment, unless they were going to do multiple excursions where it could go into the later evening. Now, if members are concerned that that could be the case, then a condition could be put on that the building cannot be used for the purposes of the events after 4 o'clock, but the applicant could still potentially launch from that site at a later time. So yeah, it's difficult to say whether you could reasonably apply a condition, or whether you just have to look at the nature of the activity as to whether running into the later part of the evening they will be wanting to run such activity.
The second question's about flooding and it being in zone 2. Am I right in thinking that if this was for a housing application, a housing development, then the likely recommendation would be for refusal? So am I also right in thinking that any risk in flooding is for the applicant to accept that risk.
Yes, there are certain categories of developments which are more flood sensitive, and therefore, if dwelling houses were to be put in this area, then they would be deemed to be a more vulnerable development, and that would therefore raise conflict with it being in flood zone 2. However, this paragraph 7.28 of the report does identify what sorts of uses may be acceptable in flood zone 2. Includes shops, general industry, storage and distribution, assembly and leisure. And as the development falls within that category of development type, it has to be considered it's less vulnerable, but nevertheless the applicant can put in mitigating measures in terms of seeking to protect the building from any flooding that may occur.
I suppose if I may just follow on from that, I
Yeah.
suppose what I'm thinking is, if this was to be approved for the usage that we've got now, that presumably if in the, I don't know, 40 years, 50 years from now, whenever somebody came along with a proposal for housing, this wouldn't set that kind of precedent for that there can be development there. Is that because you're saying policy S4 it could be granted where there is sustainable growth of tourism? Is that right?
If I could just elaborate, I mean, you can look at this piece of land and say it's on the edge of the settlement. The district council needs housing development. We could develop that whole site with housing. However, if you've got environmental constraints that prevent that, then that sort of development won't materialise. And in this case, putting a housing development on that area because of this less vulnerable building wouldn't mean that it could automatically be converted to a dwelling where it would be more vulnerable. It would need a planning permission for a change of use.
Yeah, okay.
And so that would be how that would be assessed at that time.
Yeah, thank you. The final question is about the car parking spaces. There are 6 car parking spaces proposed, and I think it's been said that they're proposed largely for staff members. I don't know how many staff members there are, so could it be that all 6 spaces are taken up by staff members?
Again, I think the applicants obviously put forward the proposal on the basis of how much parking he feels will be required to adequately serve the building. Otherwise, he might have put forward a scheme for a lot more parking. Based on, as I say, the Highway Authority have assessed what the nature of the use of the building is. They've looked at the application and they feel that what's being proposed and provided for is acceptable in this context. I mean, again, another thing that I would draw members' attention to is this application is for a B8 use. So there's a specific condition that it's actually condition 3, which restricts the use of this building purely for the purposes that it's proposed for, so that it can't be used as a storage and distribution facility, which may have all sorts of other implications on traffic movements and the like. So it is specifically being conditioned that it is for this purpose.
Okay, Councillor Burfoot, that answer your questions. Councillor Archer.
Thank you, Chair. Most of my questions have actually already been answered by others, but just a couple of hopefully very quick ones. The issue of the 4 o'clock cut-off point, how this business will operate, would I be correct in thinking that although people won't be launching later in the day, is it not likely that equipment will be being brought back later in the day when the activities have finished, and therefore that is likely to be being used to put stuff back in after 4 o'clock? And could that be a concern in terms of usage and disturbance of local residents? And then the other one is just, are we 100% sure that footpath 17 is not going to be affected by this?
Runs across the site, and if you look at that plan, you can see where the access is, where it meets the corner of the compound area. That's where the footpath comes through. Now there has been concern raised that, well, that's cutting through where the footpath line is, but from the ordnance survey plans that have been submitted with the application, that is not the case. So I can only go by where the definitive line is on the ordnance survey plan, contextually to where the development is shown, and it is not cutting through the footpath. The access is, but there's a condition or there's a requirement that the access does not get fenced to prevent or anything in between the right of way of the footpath. So you would have the fence around the access point onto Wensley's. Then the land would be open with the track going across until it then hits the compound, and the compound would be fenced. But that track would be open across the field, so not obstructing the right way of that access.
The issue of use after 4 o'clock with them bringing stuff back to the site.
Can you turn your microphone on, please, Gary?
Sorry, yeah. Sorry, it's a case of whether you would perceive a need to put a condition on with staff members coming back, parking up and offloading canoes and rafts into that building. It's quite some distance to residential properties. It's next to the water site. You can obviously put conditions on to say there should be no activity beyond a certain time period, but you'd have to quantify what you were trying to control in terms of what that noise nuisance would be.
Okay, got nobody else down for questions, so I'll move into debate. Councillor Buckley.
Hi, yes, thank you. I'm kind of a bit baffled by this one because I can see why it'd be great to have it, and I can see that it's in a flooded field outside the settlement boundary, and it's reasonably clear to me that the argument being made in section 7.4 about the I'm trying to phrase it sensibly. There's a section called HC17 which allows us to build or to allow sporting buildings outside and in the green spaces. But they've already said that they will continue to work at that place, run their business from that point, and so therefore section S4, not building in the countryside, I would think holds and doesn't require us to give them leeway because they're planning on keeping their business there anyway. So that's kind of baffling me. We've got one rule, and we've got a rule which allows us to bend it, and then they're saying they don't need to actually bend it because they're working elsewhere and they can continue doing the stuff they're doing. all right, they're in trouble. They need to do various bits. They need to find somewhere new to keep their kayaks. But essentially, we're saying one thing. We're saying that you can bend it, and then we're saying we don't actually need to because of the situation they're in. So I'm a bit dubious about whether or not we should have actually offered. We should have opted to allow this development in the first place. And then there's a question of the riparian rights. I'd like to have seen that investigated a little closer. You know, like if they didn't object to the Queen's Counsel letter, is that because they expected to lose, and so therefore something could be moved forward? So I'm kind of a bit uncertain about this, although I can see all the arguments and I can see exactly why they want it. I'm going to wait for a bit more debate before I make my mind up. Oh, and the final thing, they're going to be using showers. We're going to be putting solar panels on the roof. And using grey water, so that sounds great. But without a battery to actually hold the electricity from the solar panels, there won't be enough power to run a shower. And so, are they planning on bringing in a battery or bringing in power from somewhere else? And then the sewerage, that wasn't absolutely clear either. So I'll wait for other things, but at the moment I'm definitely not made my mind up on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fitzherbert.
Thank you, Chair. I think one of the most crucial things about this, and I think we've had a good discussion so far, and everybody spoke, very eloquently this evening, is that it's outside of the settlement boundary. But I think in the officer's report, well, certainly in Councillor Swindle's, in the reply to his again another eloquent email that we all saw yesterday, at points 2 and 3, that the defined settlement boundaries, planning permission will be granted, I repeat, where it represents the suitable growth of tourism or other rural-based enterprises in sustainable locations where identified as not met already. So I think that answers Councillor Buttle's point. And then it goes on to say, it involves development associated with sport and recreation. Well, I think this is obviously sport and recreation. And I think this application, in my opinion, improves accessibility to this particular sport. It may not, with the other riparian users, they may not all see the same light, as it were. But we are where we are. We've got these users. How can we assist this particular company with their needs? In my opinion, it improves the traffic management. As has been said suitably, you're not going to get a team of 16 all parking in a 6-bay car park when they've all been, when it's the staff predominantly, it seems to me, are parking there. When the clientele park downriver, down here somewhere in Matlock, and then they're bussed back to the start of their activity. So that seems to me, a much greener way, a much more sensible way of doing it. May increase our take in the car park at Matlock Bath, and it also increases the offer of our activities in the Derbyshire Dales. And I would say this, obviously I declare an interest as chair of the local tourist board. It increases the wonderful tourism offer that we have, and I think this is a great fillip to this. I'm talking later this week about well-being and things like that, and I think getting out and about and doing such things is very good, especially after our pandemic. And this company, it seems to me, are trying to do it in the right way. Yes, there are some problems, and yes, the local residents are very concerned about that. But it is not in their interest to do this badly. It is not in their interest to have traffic all parked up on Wensleys. That is not going to work. That is not in anybody's interest, most of all, the companies. I've just looked at their TripAdvisor reviews, has been revealed in one of the speakers' talks this evening, and 99.9% of first class. It's they're a fantastic company, it seems to me, although I haven't used their wares myself. they're very professional, they're very reputable company, and I think, in fact, they respect the environment. And I'd like to move this application.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fitzherbert. That's been seconded by Councillor Purdy. Anybody else wishing to speak in debate before I move to the vote? Yep.
It's sad to report, as we know factually, those that are close to the rivers and anglers, that they are entrenched and there seemingly is no chance of them coming together. I mean, as a young bobby in the 1970s, I was sent to report of a fight on the A6 outside of Masson Mill, and I was walking up and down for ages, I couldn't see anybody fighting, and then I heard a cry, and there was a canoeist and a fisherman in the river fighting. So it's sad. I have a responsibility as leader of this authority to encourage business into the Dales, and this is a business, and I think therefore we should encourage businesses like this. I personally want to thank Pete Hassel before on email, but I'm going to thank him publicly for the work that Paddle Pete do in cleaning our rivers. They clean our rivers of tons of waste and debris. We've got photographic evidence, and my comments now are nothing to do with me being biased towards that. That is separate. That's a pure thank you. So my comments now are based purely on planning training, planning law, etc., etc. Highways have stated their case. I've only ever known us go once against highways, and we lost. It was an application at the back of Jackson Tour Hotel, if you remember, and we didn't win. So basically, in planning speak, highways speak is the Bible. They have no objection here, and therefore I don't see any reason for grounds for refusal on that basis. And I therefore start to reach for other reasons for refusal. And I can't see them, and I'm sorry to tell the public that are objecting, and I respect their views and I respect Councillor Swindell's views, but it has been judged in the past in a court case from years ago when all this building of houses took place in Leicestershire, that the judge said basically that public lobbying has to be taken into account, but it's not a reason for refusal. I think I'm right in saying that. Thank you, Kerry. So therefore I can't find a real reason for refusal, and I think the reasons for the fact that they are well respected on TripAdvisor, they bring income into this area. I have no reason to suspect that it's not a well-run business, as is alleged in some of the comments, and therefore I'm happy to second it, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Purdy. Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. Well, it's very interesting, really. It's a very, very balanced issue here, very much so. We have to think deeply about this one. First of all, I do support Councillor Purdy that we got to bring tourism into the area, definitely, and also encourage sport in the area. But on the other hand, we've also got to respect other interests of fishermen, of walkers, and other road users. It's very balanced, really. So we've got to look at two sides, really. One side which I'm very concerned about, very much so, the time scale of finishing at 4 o'clock. I mean, you can't go on the river really after 3 o'clock in the winter time when the nights are coming in very fast. You're going to have accidents. People are going to be out there in the dark. Everything's got to be off that river before 4 o'clock, really, to be safe. And it's unsafe for people to be on the river banks after 4 o'clock. So they should all be away by that time for health and safety reasons. So this has got to be if it goes through, this has got to be a condition of moving in the winter time, especially moving the times to shorter hours, to probably 3 o'clock rather than 4 o'clock, for a safety aspect. Also, that if that would be a condition, alteration, a condition, in my opinion. And also, it's really very, you can't expect to take all them vehicles onto a field when it's all wet and all buggy and that, and they're going to get stuck. Some of them trailers are big trailers with lots and lots of canoes on. At Matlock Bath, they've got hard standing. They can get about better, and also at Matlock Bath it's lit up, so it's a different issue entirely. So really, you're going to finish up with a lot of vehicles on the road, and it's going to cause confusion with the residents that have got to get through to their properties, confusion with the fishermen. So it's a very, very difficult one. This is really we want to encourage tourism, we want to encourage sport. Then again, we don't want to make it life difficult for other people and health and safety reasons. So I'll wait for other people to speak, but I'm very balanced on this one. I'd like to have other views, Chair.
Right, thank you, Peter. Gary, did you want to come back?
Thanks for raising the point again, Councillor Slack. I'm thinking in terms of we could have some kind of condition, say close an hour before the legitimised
I don't like running other people's businesses from a planning point of view.
I'm just exploring, Councillor Fitzgerald.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking out loud. Is there a need to condition it? If so, would it be better to do it by, we've got prescribed lighting time in the morning and daylight hours, haven't we? I just wondered if that was I'm happy to be swayed either way.
Gareth.
I think the applicants, what they're saying is they only operate normally for 9 months in the year anyway. And I expect that the months they don't operate are actually the winter months when it's less appealing to actually to use the river. So the questions would arise as to if you could put a time restriction on by daylight hours, but I think basically for health and safety purposes, they will have to operate within certain guidelines. They probably won't operate in winter because of the health and safety issues. And again, it's a case of the building is essentially a storage building. Yes, they may want to put things in later or whatever, but the matter that would have to be assessed is what is the nuisance that is likely to be caused, and therefore is it reasonable to restrict the operation of the building to address that nuisance? And if members feel that that needs to be the case, then we can consider it.
Thank you, Gareth. My thoughts on reflection are that we leave it. I don't think it's wise to put a condition on it. I think this common sense needs to be applied here, which I'm sure this professional outfit will apply.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Purdy. Councillor Gamble.
Thank you, Chair. I again have some worries about how, and some concerns. The thing is, I still have quite a bit of concern as to what Highways actually did assess this as, and I still can't help thinking, like, Councillor Slack's point. Once you get to the point where that feels unusable, not only, I know you're going to go sort of into back to, I suppose, like the old situation, that people will park in the village again, except that you've now got a new situation you've put in place where you've put a leisure place in where people can shower, rest, go to the toilet, possibly get a hot drink or whatever. It will be operating in a way slightly like a sort of sailing club. Which then will make people stay at the site longer. So it will increase the parking. There won't be a flow through of parking quite as to the extent as if people are simply being brought back. And they obviously are all going to be brought back to this. I mean, you say they might put things in later, but the drawings that we're looking at today have toilets and showers. They're going to be brought back to go to the toilet and have a shower. So everybody is going to end up on that. My other concern with the parking is that we've got a sort of let's face it, very movable fence and post system. When 6 spaces isn't enough, it's not hard to imagine how this increases for more field parking. It's not, well, I'm not going to make any assumption that they are going to do that, but the field itself would lend to it. And it wouldn't be impossible to do if that was wanted. And then we would be in a situation where the footpath probably is impacted if you start getting parking beyond the 6, which, if customers do start using it, it's surely is going to end up in. My other concern is the thing that we came back with. It involves development associated with sports and recreation uses in accessible locations and least environmentally sensitive. I would have liked maybe a bit more examination in the report of that and what that meant and how we'd actually assess this location in terms of accessibility and environmental sensitivity against possibly other sites. That doesn't seem to have taken place. So I will listen to what other people have to say. I'm not sure.
Thank you. Councillor Archer.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, also not sure. Been really thinking hard on this one. Really note the concerns of the residents. I initially would normally sort of think anything to bring this sort of business activity into the Dales is a good idea, but the level of concern and opposition was a real worry, especially that those of the residents and Councillor Swindell. Interesting listening to what everyone said. I'm presuming that there would be hard car park. The car park would be hard standing, and the trucking access would be hard standing. So I don't think there's necessarily an issue with things getting stuck there. And also listening to Councillor Fitzherbert's comments about, I think potentially it could result in easing some of the issues of parking here. The fact you've actually got some proper parking provided, it means you've maybe got people who are already using this area to access the river. Perhaps it's better to have a facility where they can park off the road and out of the way, rather than having to park on the verge. And I'm assuming as well from listening to everything that's said tonight that really this building is not going to be used by the people taking part in the activity. Really, it's going to be used by the staff for storage and just to go and get the canoes and so on. And it's actually the vehicles are largely going to be parked in Matlock, and therefore it's not going to have a significant increase in numbers of people coming to this site. And listening to that, I was also worried about the precedent, but I think those issues have been answered. So I'm probably just easing towards going with officer's recommendation, but I'm based on those factors. But it is a tight one. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Archer. Councillor Mrs. Burfoot.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm really struggling with this one. I've read it through. I've read all the comments from residents, and they've got genuine concerns. They seem to be, I might be wrong, but they seem to be basically about traffic and parking and noise. Now that's why I would have liked to see some kind of condition which meant that the facility couldn't be used after. Well, I mean, the applicant themselves have said, I think I'm right, the proposed opening times will be until 4 o'clock. So I personally would have liked to have seen that as a condition. As for traffic, well, I'm kind of struggling with that one really, because presumably there won't be many people using the facility who are actually going to park near this facility. They're going to be parking elsewhere, and it'll be the staff members who park in this car park. But there is grass area there, and I'm just wondering how we could possibly stop people who are using the facility from just parking there. I don't know. I'm still struggling with it, but I take on board what everybody said.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Burfoot. So there's nobody else down on my list. So it's been moved and seconded for approval with oh, sorry, Peter. Yeah, of course you can, Peter. Yeah, carry on.
It's in regard to health and safety and 4 o'clock. I think, as I said previously, it's a very, very dangerous place to be on the river in the dark. The Environment Agency had everything off the river by 3 o'clock in the winter time, and it should be a condition that in the winter time, we don't know what time of year they're operating, but if it's in winter time, when the days are short, they should be off the river well before 3 o'clock at the very latest, and get all the equipment back to the storage. So they want to be well clear of the riverbanks by 3 o'clock, really, Chair. So could this be made a condition?
Well, that's up to the mover and the seconder, and
it's an health and safety issue, really.
Yeah, but we can't condition the usage of the river,
No.
Peter.
Well, many accidents in the past we've seen are happened in the dark. You know,
I
river
think you'll
accidents
find the
happen in the
applicants
dark.
listening anyway, Peter. So, I mean, hopefully the applicants listening and take on board your concerns.
Well, yeah, I hope so. But
No, I'm afraid while we're in committee, no, it's only the committee members are allowed to speak. So anyway, I go back to it's been moved and seconded for approval with conditions. All those in favour, please show. All those against? So, 3. And any abstentions, just in case? No. In which case, it's been passed. Thank you very much, members. So, for everybody can have a nice little bit of a comfort break. So, if members could be back for 22. Gentlemen, we'll carry on with the meeting now. It's item 5.3. It's application number 21/01283. It's a full. It's a change of use from Hotel C1 use to Children's Residential Education and Adventure Centre at Willisley Castle Hotel, Mill Road, Cromford. We have 6 speakers on this. So the first speaker on my list is Mr. Peter Assels again, local resident to speak in favour of the application. You have 3 minutes, and I'll let you know when you have 30 seconds left.
Hello again. It's the first time here, and I'm in twice. Yeah, I'm Pete Astles. Different position on this one. I'm a resident living with my wife and my 2 young children at the stables on Willisley Castle Drive. We live within the boundary of Willisley Castle, and we were very sad when the hotel went into receivership during the COVID pandemic. We were worried for our friends and our neighbours that work there, and for the upkeep of the castle. For 18 months, the property was closed, beginning to deteriorate and for sale. And for a long while, there was no buyer found. Our neighbour, the groundsman, for 30 years was unemployed and very concerned about his and the castle's future. We were concerned that the property would become derelict, fall into disrepair very quickly. Then great news, a buyer was found, Manor Adventure, an adventure company for school children. It was a great relief for us all to have someone interested in buying the castle, for the groundsman, the local residents, and the Arkwright's family legacy. A children's adventure centre, what a wonderful use for such an amazing estate and castle. Kids from all over the country can visit Cromford within the Derbyshire Dales. They can learn about the world's textile industry and where it began. They can stay in the house of Sir Richard Arkwright. They can experience the great outdoors, its wildlife within a safe and secure country estate. They can enjoy healthy activities such as climbing, kayaking, archery, and more, and be inspired to take up these activities once they return home. So Manor Adventure as well, it's going to create local employment. Groundsman's re-employed, the old manager of the hotel's re-employed. So this proposal is going to secure the legacy of Willisley Castle within the Derwent Valley Mills World Heritage Site for future generations to enjoy. All I can say is my family and I would like to welcome Manor Adventure to Cromford and wish them all the best with their next chapter of the history of Willisley Castle, which has been the home to the Arkwright family, maternity hospital through the wars,
30 seconds left.
A Methodist hotel, and now an adventure centre for young people. It's a brilliant use for the castle, and I hope you agree and can support this application. And that's what I'd like to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Right, the next on my list is Mr. Roger Yarwood, the agent. As you know, Roger, you get 5 minutes, and I'll let you know when there's 30 seconds left.
A second run for me as well, but I can't claim it's my first time here.
Not at all.
I don't think I need to say very much because I think the previous speakers spoken very eloquently about the benefits of this proposal. Clearly, Willisley Castle is a key building in the Derwent Valley World Heritage Site. It's a Grade 1 listed Grade 2 listed building. It's the most important building, one of the most important buildings in the Derwent Valley, and the loss of its former hotel use was a great worry, I think. And to find a use which fits so well is a great blessing, I think, and will do much for the local economy. Clearly, there are issues, particularly with regard to the use of the surrounding parkland, and we've come to an arrangement with the council, carefully looking at the parkland and ensuring that the ancient woodland and sites of special scientific importance are protected and not used for active recreation other than their historic uses for climbing, abseiling, and guided walks. The less sensitive parts of the parkland will be used for recreation, as they have always been in the past. Historically, there's been a golf course, swimming pool, tennis courts, archery, exercise, and all those activities will now continue, but in a controlled manner. So I think this is good news on all counts, and will bring great benefit to the district. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roger. The next on my list is Mr. Rob Miller, the applicant, to speak in favour. You also have 5 minutes. I'll let you know when you have 30 seconds left.
Good evening, everyone. I've been fortunate enough to be employed as a manager of Willesey Castle. It's a fantastic place. I came up originally not to take the job, to have a look around, but I fell in love with the place, and I quite honestly love the grounds. I'm moving up here with my family. We want to be part of the community. I feel like I've been accepted in the community already. The company I'm very familiar with, Manor Adventure, Glowbrow. I worked for them almost 20 years ago when they bought their first historic building, of which they have 7 properties now. 6 of them are historic to one level or another. The owners of the business love the old properties. They use that as their template for their school educational business, rather than some brand new build property that the youngsters go to on their school trips. It's always a historic property, and it's much more of an amazing adventure for the youngsters to do that. They have always been fantastic custodians of properties in the States. All of the ones around the UK, with the exception of Norfolk, and the 2 chateaux in France, are always carefully restored and renovated in line with all the guidance and procedures. Any activities that take place on site are always done in a sensitive way and spread around the estate, so there's not much noise whatsoever. In fact, if you have 90, 100 youngsters on the estate, you'd hardly know they were there, because they're spread around the 65 acres, or they would be spread around the 65 acres. It is a viable way forward for Willesey Castle. It is an amazing place, and it's a viable business in that this company, as custodians and owners of the building, can maintain it and continue to look after it. It isn't going to be cheap to maintain, it isn't going to be cheap to look after, but they've taken that on with their business proposition. In terms of working with the local community, obviously mixed emotions initially. What I can say is I've been actively engaging with the climbing community and with the paddling community, with the local fishing club that uses the site, and Matlock Raft Race. We have all intention of continuing to be and work with the local community. We have to sort of reinforce that the fact is it is a school setting. Schools are coming away to do their national curriculum with us. So safeguarding is an issue, but there's always a way around that, and that's currently what I'm doing with the local clubs and societies involved in it. Whenever we can, and we haven't got groups, we will open up more future public access as we go forward in a controlled manner. Again, it's already been mentioned by another person, employment. We're looking to employ about 30 people. The company, rather than use national companies, always likes to use local trades. Anyone who's been involved so far with the repair of the property has always been a local tradesman, and that's what we're going to continue to do, be part of it. I haven't got anything else to add, other than I'm pleased to be living in the area. I welcome my family to join me. Thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you very much. The next on my list is Mrs. Sarah Allen, local resident, to make a comment on the application. Right. However you wish to do it, Mr. Allen.
Okay.
But you still only got 3 minutes.
Okay, well, thanks for the opportunity to speak this evening. Myself and my wife were immediate neighbours of the Willesey Castle estate, and we have been for 27 years. We're both firm believers in action-based outdoor education. I'm an educator myself, and as such, we've got no issue with the change of use. I'm glad to see it being used as such. That's in principle. We do have some concerns, as do some of the other neighbours who I wish to speak on behalf of, about the potential ramifications of such. First, just a little bit background. So soon after moving, I was involved as a pedestrian with an impact on a car on the bend on Willersley Lane, and ever since then we've used a cut through the grounds with full cognizance of the management through Willersley Castle to access Cromford Bridge and avoid the dangerous traffic. We've now been informed that the access will be closed off by the owners with a fence across the castle's rose garden. I don't believe this is in the remit of the planning planning committee. I just put in for some background. I'd also like you to note, and I speak in respect of the other residents of the lane on which I live, that the deeds of all the properties once belonging to the Arkwright estate and sold subject to a conveyance in 1927 are legally entitled to enjoy the benefit of the water from Rivers Spring and are connected to the castle's water mains which carry this water. And no one may do anything or allow anything which may interfere with the source or enjoyment of the supply of water to adjoining premises. Rob, who you've just heard from, who's manager for Manor, has stated that he doesn't perceive the water issue to be a problem, as Manor Adventures do not intend to use the swimming pool and will be installing a new holding tank, thankfully one that won't leak like the other one did. I believe he is sincere in this regard, and I thank him very much for his comments. And the actions that he's talking about will give us some comfort that despite increased occupancy, the supply should continue as long as Rivers Spring flows, and we would welcome the change of use. Our concerns really emanate from the experience of the cavalier attitude of the previous owners towards the water needs of their neighbours, and the fact that ultimate decisions will actually rest with the owners. Mr. Yarwood has stated in his correspondence of the 17th of January, and I quote, "Issues of rights of access to and through the site and rights to extract water represent understandable concerns, but have no relevance
30 seconds left
to this proposal, as firstly, no changes to such rights as may exist are intended or proposed, and secondly, such matters are not within the jurisdiction of planning controls. So we've already been told that our access through the site will be halted. I can live with being hit by a car, but not without water, and thus contradicting Mr. Yarwood's statement, and I would call on him to confirm that the conveyance regarding water rights will be upheld. If it's not in the committee's remit to condition the application accordingly, I would ask at the very least that this point be noted.
3 minutes. Thank you very much. And the last on my list is Mr. Rob Dyer, British Mountaineering Council, to speak in favour of the application. You have 3 minutes. I'll let you know when you have 30 seconds left.
Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Rob Dyer. I'm here to speak on behalf of the BMC as their Access and Conservation Officer for England. And the BMC is the national representative body for climbers, mountaineers and hill walkers in England and Wales. The BMC is not objecting to this application, and in fact, as we stated in our written representation, adventurous activity and the opportunity for young people to experience and learn in the outdoors is something we very much support. More specifically, we feel the additional opportunities that will be offered to young people as a result of the change of use application to an outdoor activity centre are undoubtedly positive. Committee members will, however, be aware that there's been significant concern from climbers both locally and further afield who value the access that has been possible to Wildcat Crags, which sit within the site boundary of this application since the first climbs were established in 1948. The BMC echoes this concern and can confirm the strength of feeling both locally and nationally from huge numbers of climbers who cherish this fantastic crag and hope a solution can be found to allow access in the future. Since making our written submission in December, where we highlighted this concern and our desire to come to an agreement with the new landowners, we've been in contact with Manor Adventures on a number of occasions, including a site visit to discuss their concerns and options for potential future access. Although we've yet to come to a formal agreement, we've been very happy to see the willingness of Manor Adventures to engage in dialogue with us and attempt to find a solution which respects both the interests of climbers and their business needs. A proposal has been submitted to Manor Adventures for how future access could work, and initial feedback has been positive. We hope a solution can be reached that allows for Manor Adventures business to take place without issue, whilst also allowing climbers to continue to enjoy the excellent routes Wildcat Main Crag has to offer. We understand that issues of access are beyond the remit of the planning system, so we're not asking for any action from the committee, but we hope you will nevertheless in recognition of the views expressed by members of the local community, at least be able to wish both parties well in finding a mutually acceptable solution.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyway, there's no late reps on this, so I'll hand swiftly over to Sarah.
So we visited the site yesterday. To put it in context, I'll just, obviously, you all know the site very well, probably, but obviously Willisley is a Grade 2 star listed building. Its grounds are included on the Historic Register of Historic Parks and Gardens, which is Grade 2. The castles and grounds form a key attribute of the outstanding universal value of the Derwent Valley World Heritage Site, and it's within Cromford Conservation Area. To the northwest and east are areas of ancient woodland, a site of special scientific interest, and a special area of conservation. So that's the context of what we're looking at. We've got both heritage and ecology constraints. So a change of use from a hotel to a children's adventure centre is proposed, utilising the existing 43 bedrooms within the castle and the Muse building to the east. That equates to 29 double and 13 single rooms. And it's basically focusing on physical outdoor activities such as archery, climbing, etc. There were issues in relation to the information firstly submitted. So what we've done is look at sort of specifying that into certain areas and, you know, formulating what will carry out and what will be carried out in those areas. And we've sought to condition that, so link this plan, link the schedule of activities to the conditions, to a condition in the report. So I'll just roughly go through. So in the SSSI, which is the green hashed area, you'd have rock climbing, abseiling, guided walks, all on a supervised basis. And they're saying it wouldn't be intensified, particularly from what it's used as now. On the Riverside Meadow, which is number 2 in orange, it would be physical exercise and archery. They have specified no fixed equipment within that area, and also the SSSI and ancient woodland area. And then on area 1, which is where the swimming pool building is, it's fairly flat up there, but it's also, we didn't visit that part. It's up a steep track down the side of the Muse building, and you know, quite wooded, so it's not got the visibility with the castle. And then behind the swimming pool building, you can see some buildings. They're sort of flat areas of grassland. So within that area, there may be tents, possibly, but they'll be controlled in terms of the amount of time, you know, through the GDPO, the timescales in which they can be used, how long they would stay there, how many days in a year they would be used, etc. So in terms of the buildings, the building itself, we had a look round. These are the floor plans. I probably haven't got many within the building, but we did have a good look around the ground floor and looked in some of the bedrooms. So the only works, there'll be no works to the fabric. It will only be the upgrading of the en-suites. And they, from looking at them yesterday, they were fairly modern anyway. So it would be just upgrading them. On the, obviously, a lot of the objections mentioned access. It is private land, and whilst planning permission doesn't override issues to do with rights of access or land ownership, but it's not within the remit of planning to control them. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks very much, Sarah, and thank you for responding to my comments I made with regard to this heritage asset and the parkland. Are you satisfied the controls on Area 2 were sufficient enough? because when we went on site, I couldn't help notice some wooden erections on the land.
Yes, I have spoken to the applicant about those. I initially thought that they were structures to do with the archery. They are. They're covered areas for inclement weather for the archers, but it's not something that has been discussed with me. I've obviously spoken to the applicant. We need to know how they're fixed to the ground, whether they, are they movable, how long are they going to be there? I need all that information. And I do think that we have covered it sufficiently in, I think it's certainly condition 8. It's basically saying any associated equipment we need to have, agreed to.
Thank you. I'm sure residents will soon come to me if there's anything untoward. I'd like to come back to debate when you're ready. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Any more members wanting to ask questions? Councillor Burfoot.
Thank you. Can I just refer to the comments on page 41 that were made by Cromford Parish Council, and that's asking about fixed high ropes and zip wires and abseiling walls. Would they be permitted development, or would they require planning permission at a later date? I apologise if I've missed it in the report, but
It's partly the reason we sought to tie the activities down, and obviously in the activities area schedule, it does say none of these activities will involve the introduction of any fixed equipment, because there was a concern that on the website it shows lots of structures, which I've looked at and thought, well, they would require planning permission in their own, in their own right. And, there were concerns from Historic England, from the Conservation Area Officer, that we didn't want things affecting the setting of this building. So the answer is no, there shouldn't be anything like that. And that's what we've sought to tie down with the activity areas, etc.
Thank you, Councillor Burfoot. Councillor Gamble.
Can I just ask if any, thank you, Chair. Obviously, there's quite a few comments in here concerned from the climbing community. Have you been privy to any conversation to take place, or any sort of acknowledgement that's going to take place, whether they'll still have access to Wildcat Crags?
Well, I think as the applicant said, and the mountaineering person that spoke, they are in negotiations. They're doing it in a way where it's something that there's a procedure they follow for agreeing management of access. So those negotiations are happening, but it's not something I can control.
But
it's
they're
private,
outside of the council.
Yeah,
all right.
it's private land. We can't control
Okay.
the access to the crags.
Okay. And on the other, is it the same thing with the water supply? Because obviously that's quite a big concern for the gentleman who's reliant on the water.
It is a legal matter that,
Okay,
there will be covenants, I would think, about access to the water. It's not something planning can control.
Okay.
Okay, I've got nobody else down for questions, so I'll move into debate. Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Chair. Well, obviously, I'm a ward member for this area. I've lived there since '92 and been a councillor since 2007, and I've got vested interest in. I've been on the Arkwright Society board, and as I said in my submission, I've got no objection in principle to this, but obviously great concern because of its UNESCO World Heritage listing. It's a conservation area, greater listed building. In 2019, I was actually phoned by a gentleman from New Zealand who had been given to understand by his agent that it could be turned into a 5-star boutique hotel. What his agent didn't tell him was that the windows at the back looked out straight onto the cliffs. So I'm pleased that this application has come forward, actually, because as Pete Hasselwood said, we don't want this building to go into misuse, disuse and disrepair, and it's a good activity. I'm sure that Mr. Rob Miller is well aware of the uniqueness of this location and the concern and respect that people in the area have for it. So I'm very pleased to hear, Mr. Miller, that the people have advised that have rung me a lot, the residents in Willersley, the crag climbers, the canoeists, they've all rung me a lot, And I've had to advise them that, no, I'm sorry, this isn't within planning remit, you need to talk to. So I'm pleased to hear about these consultations, negotiations and talks, and I hope that, you know, you realise fully, I'm sure, that you've got to be a good neighbour, and I hope that, you know, these things can be accommodated. At the same time, I have to make the point that this is a business for young children, and therefore there's a safeguarding aspect. And I fully understand Mr. Miller's point of view that he can't just let anybody come through his grounds. He's got to be absolutely sure and safeguard the children under his care. So welcome it much, Chair. Please do move it.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Purdy. Councillor Fitzherbert.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, I'd like to second this. It's a cracking, well, it's not really reuse, it's a cracking new life, shall we say, for Willis and Clardy, a great Darley building. I know a little bit about those. The heritage needs new lives, it needs new people to look after them, and it needs investment. That's what they're going to get from this. And I'm really pleased that we can give it our support, and hopefully it will go through tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Lees.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Again, happy to support this application. We went there on the site visit yesterday, and it was most impressive to actually finally get up that drive and have a look around those premises after going past it all my life, basically. And it was nice to see that it's going to be brought back into use, and I just welcome it being developed, and hope they do well. And it was a privilege to have a walk around the interior and be welcomed by the management committee that's up there, and I wish them well and fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lees. Councillor Archer.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, won't talk for long for saying, backing what everyone else is saying, really. I think it's just a good news story. Having myself recently visited Buxton Crescent, which was a building of incredible historical significance. It did fall into disrepair, and looked into how many millions and millions of pounds it's taken to bring that back. To have such a positive scheme as this, and to hear such passionate advocates for the building, for the heritage, for the history, for the Dales, who are going to take it on, look after it, and also the support of the neighbours, which is fantastic to see as well, that everybody sort of buying into this and seeing the positives of it, as well as the fact that lots of young people are going to get a chance to visit this fantastic place, which is going to have incredible, as an educator myself and as a history teacher myself, can't see anything other than making me smile, really. It just makes me smile, this whole thing, that this is happening. So I think it's a really, really good news story all around. 100% support it. Well done to everybody involved, and all the best with making it a great success.
Thank you, Councillor Archer. Peter, over to you. Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. I echo everything what's been said by the other councillors. I think this historical building is, I'm very, very pleased that it's being brought back into good use, and the use of it is splendid, that children could come from all over the country. Linked up again with Mark Cook near Middleton, which also does similar. Derbyshire Dales will become a centre for children coming from all over the country to come and enjoy the Dales and all they offer, from rock climbing to archery. It's wonderful, isn't it, really, to what we can do in the Derbyshire Dales. So yeah, I totally support this, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Slack. Councillor Buttle.
Yeah, thank you. I was sent on an outward bound course when I was a nipper, because I think I might have been on the wrong rails, and it really helped. It was absolutely fantastic. It put me right. It turned me into quite a different person. I absolutely support this, and I also support, I did become a climber out of going on an outward bound course. I also support access to Wildcat, if that's available. If it can be done, I really think we should do that, because it is a beautiful place to spend an afternoon. Has anyone moved this? Can I move this?
It's been moved and seconded already now.
All right, sorry about that. But yeah, there we go.
You weren't quick enough getting your hand up.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last on my list is Councillor Alan Frog, and then we'll go to the vote.
Oh, did you say me? Sorry. Thank you. Oh, well, am I not getting to speak then?
I didn't see your hand go up.
Several times.
Okay, then Helen, and then Councillor Gamble, and then we'll go to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. This certainly is a good news item. The fact that it's being brought back into use for young people, encouraging outdoor activities, is absolutely amazing. Because when you drive through Cromford, drive, walk, cycle, whatever, your eyes are automatically drawn to that building, and it's just wonderful. And I think if that had have fallen into disrepair, it would have been tragic. So, you know, I just want to say thank you to everybody that's brought this forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Froggatt. So the last on my list is Councillor Gamble, and then we're going to the vote.
I just want to say, yes, no, it's a super idea. It's a super building. It looks like it's going to be brought into a great use. But can I also echo the Wildcat Crags? My husband would never forgive me if I didn't, because he's a very keen climber.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded for approval with the conditions. All those in favour, please show. Any against? Any abstentions? No. I think that's gone through unanimously. So congratulations, right. So we've got another 2 to do now. So item 5.4 is application number 21/01521 Fulks, replacement windows and erection of detached garage at Buxton House, Main Street, Kirk Ireton, Derbyshire. There's 4 speakers on this. So the first speaker is Councillor Richard Bright, the ward member, to speak against the application. You have 5 minutes, Richard. I'm sure you know what you're doing because you've been a vice chair of this committee. So anyway, over to you, Richard.
Yes, thank you, committee. Thank you, Chair. I will be brief, as I know how you need the facts on this, and so therefore, thank you for allowing me to speak on this application for the erection of a detached garage on the land to the rear of Buxton House. As you're aware, Buxton House is situated in the Kirk Ireton Conservation Area, and as ward member, I object to this application on the grounds that will have a disproportionately damaging effect on the character and appearance of the existing dwellings and their surroundings in the ancient village layout. Over many years, Kirk Ireton has seen a number of new developments that have encroached on the character and appearance of the village layout as it stood for the last hundreds of years. This means that the village is losing the open areas between dwellings that are part of the unique character. This loss has a major effect on the character and appearance of the existing dwellings and the surroundings of the village as a whole. As ward member, I urge you to go against officer's recommendation to grant the planning permission for the erection of this detached garage, and in so protect the unique layout of the village of Kirk Ireton for future generations. Thanks for your time.
Very succinct, Richard. Thank you very much for that. So the next on my list would have been, he's not here. He's had to rush off and do some surgery. So somebody else will be speaking in his place. So you have 3 minutes. I'll let you know when you have 30 seconds left.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and councillors. The first thing I'd like to say is Mr. Pickering would like to send his apologies. Unfortunately, he's a consultant surgeon at the Derby Hospital, and he's been called back to surgery. So I'm going to read out his case from my phone, and I'll try and change it into the third party so that there's no misunderstanding about who's saying it. Mr. Pickering would like to thank you for his opportunity to speak this evening. He is still not reassured by the intended use of the property described as a workshop garage. If this is used as a workshop, the impact on his wife's business could be very significant. She conducts most of her work, particularly international work, by Microsoft Teams, and unpredictable noise will make this impossible. It has the potential to put his wife's business at risk. He has taken legal advice, and it is not clear who owns the boundary stone wall. He's lived at the property for 16 years and has maintained the dry stone wall with the knowledge of the previous owner of Buxton House. He believes that he owns the wall and will not support any plans that require this wall to be dismantled or rebuilt. Under the Party Wall Act, given the proximity of the development to his boundary, Mr. Smedley, the applicant, he believes will have to serve notice if he is granted planning permission. He's taken planning advice. It is likely that the building will have to move further from his building in order to protect the foundations of his wife's office and garage, as well as protect the integrity of the dry stone wall. As a minimum estimate, if 1 metre is used as a guide for the party wall where the boundary for digging foundations is defined, then this will likely reduce the parking area in front of the garage by a further metre, leaving insufficient space to park a car, a requirement stipulated in your guidance 8C10 Part C. He wishes to confirm that a further planning submission would be required if there is a variation in the plan, should your decision be to accept the current planning application. And he thanks you for the time.
Okay, very succinct. So the next on my list is Mr. Julian Goulder, which I presume you are.
I am.
So you've got another 3 minutes.
Seamless change.
So I'll let you know when you have 30 seconds left.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, as you said, my name is Julian Goulder. I've actually lived in Kirk Ireton for the last 22 years in a house located at the far end of the lane that runs immediately adjacent to the site in question. In fact, this lane is the only route for pedestrian and vehicular access to my property, so I'm very familiar with it. I completely endorse all the points made by my neighbours, but I would also like to bring to your attention the access and parking issues which would result from this application. I understand that you visited the site, so you will be aware of the narrowness of the lane, excuse me, and due to the adjacent buildings and high garden walls, the extremely restricted line of sight when exiting onto the main street. This is particularly pertinent as the local primary school is just 50 metres down the road and the pavement is particularly narrow at this point. You may also have noticed that there are no turning areas on the lane. Consequently, to avoid either reversing into or out of the lane from the main street, it is essential that any parking space is of sufficient size so that when combined with the width of the lane, there is enough space for a vehicle to turn in such a way that it can egress in forward gear onto the main street. The existing site has a parking area of sufficient width and depth to allow this. A vehicle can be driven in and then reversed out in the opposite direction so that it can exit in forward gear onto the main road. The proposed building would reduce this area by just under 1 metre in width and by nearly 2 metres in depth, which would, with a prescribed single hinge garage door, mean that it would be almost unusable as a parking space and certainly prevent most cars from being manoeuvred to allow forward egress onto the main road. The points Mr. Pickering has raised are likely to make this problem even worse, as if the building has to be moved eastward, then this reduces the parking space even more. In summary, I believe this application, if it was successful, would significantly reduce the available parking space, resulting in more vehicles parking on the main street, and more importantly, vehicles reversing into and out of the lane, all of which increase the likelihood of accidents. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. So the last on my list is Mr. John Ralph, local resident, to speak against the application. You have 3 minutes, and similarly, I'll let you know when 30 seconds left.
Thanks, Chair. My name is John Ralph, and our cottage adjoins Buxton House, and they were originally one cottage divided many years ago. I agree with everything that's been said from the previous speakers. I'd just like to add some points about the size and scale of the proposed building. I know the Planning Committee went to see the site yesterday, and you'll see that the site for the proposed building, it's a parking space for 2 vehicles at the moment with a small garden. The garden has several trees, and that's immediately behind our parking space and our garden. Looking at the plans, the external footprint of the proposed building is about 8 metres by 6 metres. So in other words, 48 square metres. And I think the simple point I want to make is that that's just too big. And it's too big in absolute terms. It's not the size of a single garage. It's not even the size of a double garage. It's the size of a triple garage. And 48 square metres is also too big in terms of the existing parking space and garden. The 8 metre width would take up pretty much the whole of that, and that would leave little garden or little green space. So we'd be losing green space, which is obviously not a good idea. It's also too big in relation to the size of Buxton House itself, and in spite of the name Buxton House, it's actually a very small cottage. Our house is also a very small cottage. And by my calculation, the proposed building is about 2/3 of the size of the existing cottage. And I understand, and clearly I'm not an expert on planning regulations, that if this was an extension to the existing cottage, it would be rejected by virtue of size alone. As well as the footprint, it looks like the building will be about 5 metres high, which again seems pretty high, and that would cause a direct visual impact for the surrounding houses, including ours, and a loss of public visual amenity for the village in general. And you will have seen yesterday that there's a lane which goes off the main street onto fields with public footpaths, and I would guess that lane is very, very well used. And I don't know of any other new building of this size and scale which has been given planning permission in Kirk Ireton. And as Councillor Bryant has already said, it would undermine the integrity of the Kirk Ireton conservation area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So there's no late reps on this. Chris, you're doing this one, aren't you?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll just address some of the points made by the previous speakers. So the first speaker mentioned the disproportionate impact that this building will have on the character and appearance of this part of Kirk Ireton conservation area. I'll just draw members' attention to the comments of the Council's Design and Conservation Officer. The section workshop under 5.1 considers the plain and simple appearance of the outbuilding and the location in which it will be located. There's recognition that it will be adjacent to another recent outbuilding that members will have observed at the site visit yesterday. Now, the District Council's Conservation Officer is satisfied that the building, in terms of its location and its size, would be acceptable in this particular position and location within the conservation area. And they've concluded that it will not result in to harm to that heritage asset. So we've obviously taken or listened to that advice and reflected on it in the assessment of the application, and considering that it's an acceptable form of development in this particular case. The second speaker mentioned the Party Wall Act, and we can't preempt any outcomes of any negotiations under the Party Wall Act and requirement to site this building further away from a common boundary. It's not a matter that we can consider as part of the consideration of this planning application. The applicants submitted this application to us on the basis that they feel that it can be carried out. If ultimately, as part of those separate negotiations, there was an issue under the Party Wall Act and the building had to be resited, and as the previous speaker mentioned, that would be subject of a further application to us. But we have to assume that this building can be delivered in the location that's proposed as part of this application. The third speaker mentioned visibility and manoeuvring. Members will have noted from visiting the site yesterday that it is already a parking area, so vehicles already use the access to access this piece of land, and that does result in vehicle movements along that lane, and visibility is impeded, but it won't be materially affected by this particular development. It will still be used for parking, and it won't exacerbate that existing situation. Therefore, we don't feel that an objection on highway safety grounds would be sustainable at appeal. In terms of manoeuvring space, the lane is lightly trafficked, vehicle speeds will be extremely low, and we don't feel that, again, we'd be able to sustain a highway recommendation or refusal in respect of this application. You'll note in the officer's report we're happy with the general design and appearance of this particular building. This is a resubmission. It's a building that's reduced in terms of its size from a previous submission, with conditions to control details as bullet pointed in the comments and the suggestions by the Council's Design and Conservation Officer. We feel that this is an acceptable form of development that accords with development plan policies, and hence why we're recommending approval in this particular case. You'll note from the officer's report we do have regard as well to the Kirk Ireton neighbourhood plan and also the conservation area appraisal. Happy to take questions.
Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. Chris, so we keep hearing a garage and a workshop. Do you know if there's going to be a workshop there, and is it going to be used and what for?
Just to be clear, you'll note there's quite a lot of conditions actually attached to this permission, but the application is for householder development, so the building has to be used for purpose ancillary to the occupation of the main dwelling. So not a workshop in a commercial sense, but a workshop for a private individual in association with the use of that existing house as a dwelling house. So it's for private use. It's private use, not business use, and there's conditions to prevent that.
Councillor Purdy.
That was going to be my question. Forgive me, who's Eaton Planning? Have I missed some officer here who's got a surname Planning and where is in planning?
No, it's who we're using to do some
Thank
of our
you.
applications
Thank you very much.
at the moment.
Oh, right. So, we've reduced it once, Chris, but even so, with the sketch plan, that car is swallowed in that garage. And I'm sorry to be suspicious, but one does wonder what other activity is needed or required in there. And I share other members on site's concerns yesterday at the activity as a workshop. I've just heard what you've said, and obviously have to accept that, but I'm still concerned. I'll wait to hear what others say before I make up my mind. Thank you.
Any more people wanted to ask questions? Councillor Gamble.
Did you actually ask the person at the outset? I know you put a condition on to sort of make it ancillary, but did you ever ask the applicant what they intended to do with the workshop?
An application for commercial use of the building would be a completely different application type. It'd be a full application. It wouldn't be a householder application. So a householder application seeks permission for householder development, so ancillary to the main use of the existing dwelling as a dwelling house.
Oh, no worry if you didn't ask them at all. I just wondered, out of interest, did you have any conversation to ask them at all what they were going to, their plans for the workshop was? You can say no.
No,
It's fine.
we as a household application, it is what it is, and that's for activities ancillary to the main use of that existing property as a dwelling house.
You're quick off the mark, Sue. Go on
then. Just a question about the recent, the relevant planning history. I noticed there was one in 2021 for what sounds like exactly the same thing that was withdrawn. Was that a lot different?
I think it was bigger, Sue.
Yes, it was a bigger building. I think in the application section, I think it talks about this application being resubmission and the differences between this application and the previous submission.
Does that answer your question, Sue? Have you got another one or no? Okay. Councillor Lees.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yesterday when we was on site, there was some confusion as to the height of the building. Is it 4.6 metres?
It is 4.6 metres. You'll note, I mean, if you look at the elevation plan, it shows the site to be a level site. If members were concerned about the finished height above ground level, we could add additional condition to agree the platform upon which this building will sit, and any sort of cutting out of the land that would be required. But my understanding, it's a relatively level site, although it's not perfectly level, so there will be a need for some form of platform.
Yeah, thank you. I noticed it's got roof windows in the west elevation as well, which again, like Councillor Purdy's just mentioned, the workshop space, to me, the roof lights up above it, just lends itself ready for a conversion. So I'm undecided myself at the moment.
Stuart. Anyway.
Only thinking.
Councillor Buttle.
Sorry. I was thinking about the noise. Can we condition things like sound insulation in the roof so that the neighbour doesn't have her work meetings interrupted?
Chris?
I think if members were concerned about noise from the use of the workshop element, whilst we have controls, environmental health controls relating to noise nuisance, I think it would be reasonable to ask for measures to be submitted to us which seek to prevent noise outbreak from this particular building, protect the residential amenity of the occupants of nearby dwellings. I think that would be a reasonable condition if members were concerned about that.
I think that sounds like a good idea to me. I think if we could be specific that it's not going to, we're not going to be creating a noisy neighbour, that would make it easier for me to support it.
Okay. So I've got nobody else down in question, so now I'll move into debate. Anybody wishing to kick it off? Move it?
Sure.
Oh, sorry, Richard.
Yeah, I think we all don't really know about this one, do we? Really? Unless Councillor Purdy, you'd like to go before me.
Well, I'm looking for a reason for refusal, Chair.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm struggling with. So that's where I'm coming from. And I hear what Councillor Bright says and I hear what the residents say. But we go back to our planning training, we go back to our fundamental reasons for refusal.
Yeah.
And I can't see any in planning law to refuse it. So sympathetic to the views of the residents and the councillor, but unless we've got a fundamental reason for refusal, I don't see how we can refuse it. So I'll move officers' recommendations, Chair, and take the flag.
Yeah, Councillor Fitzherbert.
And I'll second that. I'm just looking at, with reservations, but obviously I've seconded it. So I'm just looking at 7.2 policy PD1 of the adopted Derbyshire problem. I've missed it, so it's the wrong one. It's just the impact on the heritage aspects in this, and I'm really struggling. I'm sure the officer would have come up, or Heaton Planning would have come up with that if it was possible. So I'm afraid reluctantly I'm going to second it.
I think we'd be looking at a noise condition as well as.
Well, I was just about to ask, are you quite happy with trying to put some noise attenuation in the building and delegate it to Chris, the development manager, or whoever?
I think along the lines of what we discussed, so condition secure measures to prevent noise outbreak from the use of, or from the building, or the use of the building as a workshop would be appropriate condition in this particular case. Just to also seek clarification, are members concerned about levels on site, and would they want the finished floor level of the building to also be agreed? So there's no doubt there.
In relation to a building at the back, as we look from the lane, there's a building at the back which is, from memory, got no windows in. The windows to the right got a small window in, so there's no outlook. But yeah, I think it's important that it doesn't become overbearing on that building at the back.
So yeah, 2 additional conditions. Okay, so you're happy with that, Richard? Okay, Councillor Gamble.
Actually, you just dealt with what I was going to sort of, what I'm a bit concerned, yeah, how it related to that building at the back. And I'm possibly also stuck. I have grave reservations about this building. The one thing is, like, this seems to be now replacing a building, a piece of land that would have parked 2 cars, with a building now that, as far as I can see, you'll only get 1 in. So it does concern me what that, again, if there's restricted parking in the village. So I'll listen to what other people say.
Councillor Buttle.
I just had a query with Chris. It was to do with noise outbreak, as Eve terms it. Will the roof lights be openable? And can we say they shan't be?
I think what we can do, because obviously there's a door as well, isn't there? And if that door was open whilst you're carrying out activities in that workshop area, then there's going to be quite significant noise outbreak, isn't there, from the building? So things, and the management or the use of the building, and when you're using, if there's going to be any machinery in there, that perhaps doors and windows are closed whilst that machinery is being used. It's that kind of detail that we'd want to look at, really.
We could do that, though.
Yeah, it's part of a scheme.
Right,
yeah, it's part of a scheme.
I think it's unreasonable. It's probably an unreasonable condition to apply to a householder. Okay, so Councillor Archer.
Thank you, Chair. It wouldn't be a planning meeting without me having at least one pop about the.
No, don't worry about it, Robert.
The difficulty for people with full-time jobs in attending site visits with the timing of them on a Monday or pretty much all day. So I'm going to make that point again. On this sort of case, I was able to attend the site visit. It seems a very large building to me for the setting. I've not been able to be there to listen to officers and explain how it sits. So I'm just making this comment because I'm going to have to abstain on this one because I feel I've not got enough knowledge and understanding of this particular site. Thank you.
Okay, so there's nobody else down on my list, so it's been moved and seconded for approval with the conditions and 2 extra conditions. Oh, Peter, go on then.
Oh, quickly.
You have to be quicker with your hand.
I'll be very brief. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Purdy. There's no reason we can not approve this, really. In regards to this window light over the workshop, if they do come again and try and turn it into a dwelling, that's a completely different planning application. So that'll be different again. So, yeah, I support it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sachs. So it's been moved and seconded for approval with conditions and the 2 extra conditions as set out by Chris. All those in favour, please shout. Those against? Any abstentions? So it's been approved with conditions and the 2 extra conditions. Thank you very much, members. So then last bit of business we need to do now,
Chair.
apart from a little...
Chair, do you need to move for the extension?
Right. Are you happy to move it? Yeah, all those in favour?
I will move for an extension for half an
Councillor
hour.
Purdy, second. Yeah, all those in favour, please wheel in your hands. Thanks. Okay, so we'll carry on then. So the last one on my list is application number 21/01474 full. It's 1 Pinecraft Ashbourne. It's 2-storey side extension. There's no speakers on this, and I believe this is yours again, Sarah. Okay.
Yeah, we went on site to look at this. The main issue with this is the street scene from within the cul-de-sac and the way the extension touches the boundary with the so it's really the angle, and it touches the boundary with the footpath. It's a, a kind of balanced view on whether we feel the harm from the impact on the street scene from within the cul-de-sac is significant. Happy to take any questions.
Members, open to you. Questions? 2 of you. I'll tell you what. You go first, Sue.
Thank you. It's just about this blank side elevation. I noticed you say in the report that it would be quite dominant, and being there on site, it would seem to me that it would be quite dominant in the street scene, so to speak. Is there any way that we could condition in a couple of windows to sort of break up that blank elevation? I think that's the problem I've got with it. If they want to extend this amount on that tight site, then I'm happy with that. But it's just this side elevation. But can I just also ask? Am I assuming we've had no objections from anybody living on that cul-de-sac? Apart from the town council.
Yeah, we've had no objections from any residents. It was really the town council considering it to be overdevelopment. They made those comments when there was a box roof dormer on the back of it also, which has been removed with the negotiations. So as to whether we can condition windows, it's putting something on them to change what they've got what they're asking for permission for, and that's my worry. It's as it's put forward like this. They knew the recommendation. I discussed it with them in terms of why it had to go to committee in a balanced view, and they chose to have it go to committee and not reduce it or change it. So that's my concern.
I haven't got strong feelings about it. It's just it's a blank wall.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Barefoot. Councillor Bottle?
Mine's more philosophical questions.
At this time of night.
If we're a balanced view, as a planning committee, do we just let people get on with their lives and not interfere? Is that what we should be doing, or should we be sticking our nose in? Because if it's a balanced view, I would have thought we should default to let people get on with their lives.
Well, obviously, I've I've said that it's a balanced view in the report, but I have come out and said my recommendation is to approve.
Okay. Councillor Sue Paul.
Yes, thank you, Chair. You have made a comment that it will change the street scene because it is literally coming closer and closer to the pavement, and looking at this, how I see it, it will make quite a big difference on street scene if it is fronting straight onto the footpath area more so than the others. So does that not class in the overdevelopment of an area considering to the other surrounds?
Well, my recommendation is based on whether I think we would win an appeal, and I do think that's why I've gone to the side of approval, because the street scene from the main road I think isn't an issue. It's really from within the cul-de-sac, and because of the orientation of that building and how it sits with its neighbour, that's why I've made that recommendation.
Does that answer it for you, Sue? In a roundabout sort of a way. Yeah, well. Anyway, Peter.
Right, thank
it's your go now.
Thank you, Chair. We viewed it from all angles yesterday, and I didn't think it was too bad personally. It's a matter of opinion, isn't it, really? But I think it was acceptable, really, Chair. So I'll I'll move it if you like. Yeah.
In which case, we're in debate now, so you've got to move it, are you, Peter?
Well,
right.
whatever, yeah.
Right, I'll put you down as moved. Anybody else wants to second it? Okay, Councillor Mrs. Burfoot. We're getting through some business tonight. Oh, you've nothing to say? Oh, no, I thought you might second it soon now. Oh, right, yeah. That's it. Councillor Gamble.
If you hadn't ignored me, I'd have seconded it.
It's whose hand I see up first, and she was very quick this time.
And actually, I'd say, although I know the debate is from the cul-de-sac scene, but I think from street scene, I actually think this actually improves the front street scene. I think it makes it look a more balanced house. So.
Okay, thank you very much. So, anybody else wishing to speak in debate now? So it's been moved and seconded for approval. All those in favour, please show. All those against? Any abstentions? So that's carried, it's approved. Yeah, okay. So anyway, it's just a bit of housekeeping now, ladies and gentlemen. So, there we go. Item 6, information on active and closed enforcement and investigation. It's only for noting, so I'll move it for noting. So I find a seconder. Thank you very much, Councillor Lees. Going to show of hands. That's it. That's been noted. And the last one is appeals progress report. Chris, is there anything you want to add to it before I move it?
No, Chair, we have received some additional appeal decisions this week, which will be reported on next planning committee. I think the only appeal decision on this agenda of note is the North Park Farm appeal decision, which is a good outcome. It was on the back of enforcement action that's taken by the authority, and good work on the part of our enforcement team. Because originally it was proceeding by public inquiry, we found some new information which meant that the appeal under Ground D couldn't go forward. So it was dealt with under written reps in the end. One of the grounds was that planning permission ought to be granted for what was alleged in the notice, and that was conversion of what was a modern agricultural building in part to a dwelling. And the inspector agreed with us that it was an inappropriate form of development. So therefore, that dwelling house will have to be removed from that building and all the associated works carried out as part of that. So it's a good outcome.
Very good for our
It is a good outcome. Can I ask, do you know roughly when that process might start? Or?
What happens is once the date of that appeal decision, so there's time frames specified in the original enforcement notice, and they have that they basically start from the date of that appeal decision. So the notice is upheld, and they have however many months we gave them to comply with the requirements and the steps in the notice. Well, they've not, because the appeal proceeded on ground A, the planning permission ought to be granted, and that failed. They've not really got anywhere to go. They've got to really just comply with the notice. Failure to not comply will result in us needing to take next steps, whether it's injunction or prosecution.
Okay, so I'll move it for noting. Can I find a seconder? Tell you what, we use Councillor Burfield for this one. And all those in favour, please show. Anyway, thank you very much, members. So you're free to go home.